Today I'll be showing you how to build your own concert ukulele. The body is made with the Glowforge, the neck is purchased, and I'll provide the supplier information later in the video. So let's get started. The materials and tools that I use throughout this video are included in the description below. I start out by preparing all of my wood for cutting. I have this masking tape that I use that adheres really well, and I just make sure that I mask both sides of the material, and I use a squeegee to make sure that that is adhered really well. If I'm using plywood that has one side with the good wood, then I place an X to mark that side. In this case I was using cherry, so I wanted to make sure that I marked which side had the cherry veneer. Once you've applied both sides and trimmed it, just make sure you go over it one last time with that squeegee to make sure that that paper is adhered as well as possible. Before you actually begin cutting out your files, make sure that you run some test cuts to determine the exact settings that you need to use for the materials that you've selected. The first set of files that I'm loading is the Concert Ukulele Inner Frames SVG file. The first order of operation will need to be a score. This is the alignment marks at the top of each piece. These inner frames need to be cut out of a 1/4 inch piece of plywood. I'm using cherry in this instance, but you can use any material that you would like. Just make sure it's a 1/4 inch. Based on the fact that I'm using cherry, I'm using those settings for thick cherry wood as a basis to start with, and then I always set the focus to get the actual height of the material, and I make sure that that's set to auto on the focus height. And I've tested my materials, so I am making some adjustments to those settings, the cut settings, but I use the score settings as is. And then I'm ready to print. Almost 9 minutes later, we have our first set of cut files, and this is what the inner frames file will look like when it's completed. The rest of the files will be cut on 1/8 inch birch plywood. So I'm selecting the medium draft board as the base for my cuts. I'm loading the living hinge file first. As you can see, this file contains a lot of intricate cuts, and this allows the wood to bend, and we'll be bending it around this shape of the inner frame. I'm moving that second operation up to the first operation. This is the alignment mark. I'm going to set that to score. The rest of the cuts, or the rest of the operations, will be cuts. And I have the 1/8 inch birch plywood settings already set up in my system, so I selected that, changing the focus height to auto. For the last operation, I'm doing the same. And then I'll go to set focus, and that just helps me get an accurate reading of the height of the material. Once it is completed focusing, I just double check that those focus heights are still set to auto. And then I'm ready to print. And you can see this one takes much longer than the last file. Here's how the living hinge looks after it's cut. And the magic of the living hinge is that it is now flexible. The last file that we'll load is the concert ukulele top bottom SVG file. These files will take a whole piece of birch plywood. You see that they're angled in order for them both to fit on the same sheet. So the first operation needs to be set to a score. These are the alignment marks for the neck and the bridge. The second is a cut, and again I'm using my birch plywood settings. Setting that focus height to auto for both operations. And then I choose set focus again. And just hit print after it's autofocused. And this one takes much less time to cut. I didn't get a video of the completed cut, but here's the last part of the file being cut. I have removed the masking from all of the pieces. I have the living hinge pieces. I have the inner frames, and then I have my set of spring clamps. So you want to start with the top inner frame, and this is the one that has the most bracing pieces, and turn it over so that the mahogany side or cherry or whichever side you want, the side that has the alignment mark is facing you, and then the alignment mark on the living hinge with the hole lines up, place it so that it lines up with the alignment mark on the inner frame. And you're going to glue this in place and clamp it. I like to use Gorilla wood glue. It seems to work really well. I put it in a smaller bottle that has a finer tip on it, and that helps me control the amount of glue that I'm putting on the piece. The downside is that it tends to get clogged up, so you may have to get something to actually unclog it with. And then you're just going to continue to run a bead of glue down the side of that frame. You want enough glue so that it will adhere well, but not so much that it's going to spread that glue everywhere and get drips. You can see that that living hinge easily conforms to the shape of the inner frame. And you want to work here to get the edges to be even. You don't want one side to be higher than the other. So you don't want the living hinge piece to be higher than the inner frame. So spend a little bit of time making sure that those pieces align properly, and then set your clamps in place. And you don't want to take too much time doing this because your glue will begin to dry rather quickly and it won't adhere. And keep checking that those edges are aligned at the same height. I find that the smaller spring clamps do well on that tightest inner curve. Make any adjustments that you need to at this stage before the glue sets up. Now that everything's clamped, just allow it to set up for about 20 minutes or whatever the setup time is for your particular glue. While we're waiting on the glue to set up, we can assemble the 3 neck block pieces. So simply glue all 3 pieces together, ensuring that the holes line up exactly. The neck bolt will go through these holes to attach the neck to the ukulele. So it's important that they align perfectly. Once you have the sandwich glued, clamp it in place, making sure that nothing slips out of alignment. Now that the glue has set up, I remove the clamps. I'm just checking to make sure that there's good adhesion all the way around. And with the remaining long living hinge piece, just check the fit. It will need to be stretched just slightly, but it is flexible, it does stretch. So just apply glue around the edge like we did with the top portion of the hinge. And then begin by clamping one side, making sure that it butts up to the other hinge, and then stretch the other side so that it butts up to the other side or the end of the other side of the hinge. Clamp it in place, and then work around to make sure that everything is lined up, and clamp in place. The more clamps you have, the better. Now we just set it aside and wait. After at least 20 minutes, you can remove the clamps and check that everything is adhered well. Now we can attach the neck block. We need to make sure that the holes in the neck block piece aligns perfectly with the hole in the side of the living hinge. So take some time, get it aligned, and then clamp it in place, and then check to make sure that that alignment is still in place. Then while we're at it, we can add the tail piece, the tail block. It's just that short piece of living hinge, and just glue that in place and then clamp it down. Now that the neck block and the tail block are in place, we can add the bottom inner frame. We're just going to put a bead of glue around the upper edge of the living hinge sides and seat that frame inside of the hinge. This part can be a little tricky, so you'll have to kind of press from the inside, pushing that hinge out so that that frame will sit down inside of it. Get it aligned and then start clamping. It helps to have more clamps than I have here. So you may need to move these clamps around after a few minutes to provide additional pressure in the areas you didn't get at first. After allowing it to set up for at least 20 minutes, you can remove all of the clamps and then check to make sure that there's good adherence all the way around. And then take some time to remove any excess glue that may be left behind. Our inner frame is almost complete. We just need to wrap something around the sides to close up all of those little holes that are left by the cuts. So for this example, I'm using cardstock, just simple cardstock. And I like to use the 3M adhesive tape to adhere that cardstock. You can also use Mod Podge. I've done that in the past, but I'm just applying the 3M adhesive to a piece of cardstock. Trim that off, apply it to the other end just to make sure that the complete piece is covered with that adhesive. I previously measured the side of the ukulele and it's 2.25 inches. So I'm cutting 3 strips at 2.75 inches to give me some extra room on either side that I can trim away. And I just need 3 pieces approximately that size. The last size is bigger because I just didn't want to trim that one down any further. And you can wrap this around the ukulele. So just peel away the backer that's on that 3M, and it should leave a sticky residue on the sheet. And I start at one end so I can get that adhered first, and then I just work my way around, pressing it to the side of the ukulele, making sure that I have a good bond. And then I take an X-Acto knife and I just trim away any excess that remains. Repeat this for the other 2 pieces, making sure the ends meet. After I adhered the cardstock, I decided to paint the sides of mine that will match up with my top and bottom. But now we're going to adhere the top of the ukulele. So get my clamps, get my glue, and I just need to apply glue to all of the areas of the ukulele, including those inner bracing pieces. And then just take your time aligning the top to those sides, making sure that everything aligns up. There may be a little bit of a lip, but there should not be much. And you'll find that when you start to clamp these down, these pieces can slide This glue is famous for that. So just take your time, clamp it in place, start at the top and then the bottom, and then work on the sides. Checking, refitting, reclamping. It's a process. Again, it would be better if I had more clamps, but I'm working with what I have. And after I've had these clamped for a few minutes, I will move them around to different areas to get pressure evenly across all parts of the ukulele. I'm just removing some more excess glue. You can let that set up for 20 minutes at least. Time to unclamp and see what we've got. Starting to look like a ukulele, and here's what it would look like with the back, but we're not going to put the back on just yet. We want to go ahead and install the neck before we apply the back. Now it's time for an unboxing. I ordered the neck from MGB Guitars, and this is actually a whole kit. So it comes with the neck, it comes with the bridge, the tuners, and ukulele strings. So let's see what we've got. Alright, so here's the neck. Already comes with the fretboard and the frets. Has the nut bolt. There's ukulele strings. And then we've got the bridge. We've got the bone nut that goes at the top of the neck. And then we've got our tuners. So there's 4 of these tuners. So let's get to installing. Alright, let's start with the neck. And here's the body piece that we put together previously. Let's just remove the nuts and the washers from the neck bolt. There's 2 washers there. So we want to do a dry fit, make sure that everything fits nicely. It should sit flat against the body and flat against the top. If the hole isn't low enough or isn't high enough, you can just use a drill bit to round that out a little more. There is a mark on the ukulele that shows you where that neck should land, and it should land perfectly within that alignment mark. So let's put some glue on the back of the fretboard and at the end of the neck, and then we'll just slide that into place. Push down on it to make sure that it is flat against the top of that body. So with that pressure being applied, we put the larger washer and then the smaller one and one of the nuts that came with it. And then we need a number 10 socket. And then we just tighten that nut down, making sure that fretboard is flat against the top of the ukulele. There should be no space between the neck and the top. And go ahead and clamp the fretboard down to the top of the ukulele as well, and allow that to set up for 20 minutes at least. While we're waiting on that to dry and set up, we can install the bridge. And there is a mark as well for the placement of the bridge. It should fit right in that alignment mark. So we just glue it. Make sure that the screw holes are closer to the bottom of the ukulele. Once we have that in place, we can just set something on it to weight it down and make sure it doesn't slide out of place. You would think we were ready to put on the back, but not quite yet. I want to go ahead and add the screws to further attach the bridge. And I'm using a pretty small drill bit. It's this one happens to be 0.065 inches in diameter. You can use a little bit bigger, but not much. I think the screw diameter inside the threads is about 0.08 inches. But you want to drill those pilot holes for your screws. And this is the reason I don't put the back on, because of all the debris. I don't want that getting inside of the ukulele. So just drill those holes. Sweep away my debris. And then you're ready to install the screws. So the packaging comes with a lot of screws, actually, in this case. I only needed 2. Just go ahead and install those. They can be a bit fiddly because they're so small. You don't want to drill that hole out too large, or else this will not hold. So a little bit smaller hole is better than a larger one. I'm just checking the depth of the screws. It comes with plugs that you can put over the top of the screws. I'm not going to put those in now, but you can add those later. Now we can close up the back. Check that the neck is secure and fit the back piece. Get all of our clamps ready. As we did before, we'll just apply the glue after I unclog it. Again. And just like we did with the top, we want to align the back with the sides. And we start clamping at the top. And then we'll clamp at the bottom and then work our way around the edges. And we adjust as necessary, because when you start to clamp down, that glue inevitably will make those pieces slide. And as I said before, the more clamps that you have, the better. I'm just working with what I have. So after a few minutes, I will reposition the clamps to provide pressure evenly around the entire ukulele. Let it set up for 20 minutes. Let's remove the clamps and see how she looks. There we go. It's a ukulele, guys. Now we're getting down to the finishing touches. So we want to go ahead and install the tuners on the top of the neck. So I'll take out the 4 tuners. Each come with 4 washers and 4 nuts. They also come with 4 screws. We'll deal with those in a bit. So we need to align these properly. So there's 2 that go on the left-hand side, 2 that go on the right-hand side, and they're kind of labeled on the back so you can determine which way they go. And that's if you're looking at the back of the ukulele neck. So just place those in place. The screw holes go down towards the bottom right edge. So that's how they'll go in. Let's flip this over, see if I can keep them in there. Nope, they're all going to come out. All right, well, we'll start with 1. And we want to put a washer and then a nut, and just tighten it by hand at this point. We can put them all in place. And don't worry about the alignment just now. We'll get to that. So we can use the same socket that we used for the neck. And at this point I just hand tighten. I want to be able to adjust them, so I don't want them too tight at this point. And then I turn the ukulele over so I can get a better visual of those tuners, and I can align those. And just do this by eye. And then take your socket and tighten them down a little further. You don't want to over tighten at this point. You still want to be able to slightly adjust them. We're going to be drilling holes for the screws, and we can do some little adjustments before we do that. Once we place that screw in there, then we can tighten them down further. So just take your time and get these aligned where you like them. And then once they're where you like them, then we're going to take that same drill bit that we used for the bridge and drill little pilot holes. Now be careful here not to go through the neck. So we're just going to drill down a little bit. And there's screws that came with the tuners. So we're going to take 4 of those screws and just put them in place. Again, they're fiddly because they're so small. Yep, see? They like to escape on you. Alright, now that they're screwed down, then we can tighten it down a little further. You don't want to over tighten these, but you want them in there securely. And just check the tuners, make sure that they turn smoothly. And now we have our bone nut that goes at the top of the neck. We just need to glue that in place. So just use a little bit of wood glue. And clamp that in place. And we'll let that set up for about 20 minutes. All right, now we're ready to remove that last clamp. So we have built the body using the Glowforge. We've installed the bridge. We've installed the neck, the bone nut, the tuners. When you go to string the ukulele, you will install the bone saddle. As is, it sits a bit high, so you'll want to sand that down so that the action isn't too high. I am not going to show you how to string the ukulele. There are lots of videos online on how to properly do that, and then how to properly tune your ukulele. I also want to show you some other examples that I've made and what you can do. This one was painted, but you can engrave. Now this one is actually a baritone, so it's larger, but you still can see how I've engraved on the top as well as inside. I also didn't finish the outside of the sides, but I finished the inside of the sides. So that's a little bit of a different look. This is actually the first one that I made. It just has a plain back, and it's just painted, spray painted actually. And then another example that I have is also a concert ukulele. And this one was covered with scrapbook paper and then cut. I covered the top and bottom with the same paper as well as the sides, and then I made a little sticker for inside. Much different look. And then I put a coat of varnish all over it. The files and build guide are available for purchase, and I'll include that information in the description. If you like these videos and you would like to see more, please subscribe and give it a thumbs up, and I hope to see you back here. Thanks.